So we can skip the Cargill introduction and go directly to the developments that led to customer focus reduction. So I think everyone will agree that shipping industry has become more complex, the globalization, and I think we saw it in the earlier presentations. So who is the customer and what is expected? The strategic focus is on cost efficiency instead of the customer focus. So also nowadays we see less visibility with the growing use of remote support centers and working with EDI. So EDI, they increase the transparency if the data quality is good, so accurate, in time, and complete. But yeah, sometimes we also lose the touch to speak about issues that happen in the container supply chain, and especially that we keep on speaking terms. So not always the defense mode with the disclaimer what we saw with the containers arriving in Spain. So first talk about the issue, and yeah, the damage we can discuss about later. Business cycles are getting shorter and more erratic. That especially counts for Cargill, but I think it's also a global trend. So it becomes more difficult to forecast, and the products or the commodities need to move quicker. And what you also see is that they often move from different locations, different origins. The reduced flexibility to differentiate due to operational alliances that run like standalone machines. You already used the quote, Steve. What I see is often a disconnect between the customer service, the sales on a local level, and the central office that is responsible for the operations and the central pricing. Now I have some examples for you as well. So what happens where we get the perception that we have been forgotten? So we nominate a carrier for the next, in an annual contract, and just in the first week of the new contract, we get the pre-notice that the service is withdrawn. So that's a 1 week pre-notice where we need to think of alternatives. Next one, container sitting weeks in the port. It's the port of LA, but while the carrier has an internal discussion, who is accountable for getting the containers out of the terminal? And in the meantime, we have nothing to say to the end customer that is desperately in need of the containers blocked in the port. The recent development of divestments of chassis equipment in the US, that's a trend what we saw, and it becomes more challenging to get door services from ocean carriers, and they're actually not offering it anymore in some cases, and we need to look for our own solutions. The static carrier approach related to the annual volume. So we try to forecast our volume even when we are in the food industry, and it's not always easy to do. And we have some swings week on week, or month to month, or quarter on quarter. But we believe that the total volume in 1 year is what we nominate to carriers. And there is where you see the static approach, that your annual container volume is divided by 52 weeks. Meaning if you nominate 100 containers, and even when you, we only ship those out in clips of 20 containers each, the weekly allocation is 2 containers only. So in that sense, it wouldn't mind if we have nominated nothing or 100, because 2 is unworkable either way. So the centralized decision making, that's what we do in Cargill when we speak about the 6,000-7,000 port pairs that we need to execute 160,000 containers. We make that on a central level. So the service level, we have a nice bid guide in place and we allocate the annual volume. But what we face during the year is relatively low compliance on the execution. I say relatively, that we compare it to other modes, like the truck mode, where you seems to have can reach in compliance higher than 98%. So what it then means is often in the discussions with the carriers, it goes about issues. During the quarterly review meetings of the service. So is there a way how we can improve the service transparency to reduce the total cost in the container supply chain? Or actually, let's not speak about cost, but about value. So how can we increase the total value in the supply chain? So I think we heard a couple of examples. Shippers want to make decisions based on carrier service levels. But at the same time, shippers do not always have the access to the information they need. Can we really say, can carriers really differentiate on the different service criteria? And schedule reliability is one, but it's not the only one. I think they can reach up to 20 or 25. So then you come to the point, what also an Asian carrier told is we would like to have better service level, but there isn't much we can do. Or maybe where should we start? So cost of service is important, not the commodity price being the result of the supply and demand. Where we often get the feedback from carriers that we are price-oriented, or like the Daily Maersk, it didn't work because shippers didn't want to pay for it. What you see on, let's say, the Asia-Europe trade is when it becomes a commodity, it's not the shipper anymore who dictates the price or there's nothing to negotiate about. It's simply the result of supply and demand. So some examples how we can reconnect the container supply chain around the world. One of the things, we can build an interactive ranking and information platform. Similar to booking.com for hotels, why don't we create a containerbooking.com? So carriers can differentiate on the service, and the different shippers can evaluate the service from the different carriers, and then even you can categorize by reverse or dry packaged food stuff or other things to make a ranking. So my question also later on would be to the carriers, do you want to create that transparency as well? So it becomes an information platform where it's also easier for shippers to decide for which carrier to choose for. So what we also need, I think, is bigger scale and a wider scope. So carriers can really hear the shippers. Because I think we see a lot of similarity between the requirements from different shippers. But do we always translate that in the same way to the carriers? Most probably not. So I think we can improve on that. So it also becomes more important and also better manageable for carriers to work on the service. Superior technology that can reconnect shippers, carriers, terminals, and 3PLs. So we said it before, the door-to-door service is, that's where we need the transparency and the full visibility, and not only on the ocean side. So let's keep the dialogue, make it interactive, useful, and also fun. Because if you're speaking day in, day out with carriers only about issues, I think it's a nice industry to be in. It's very dynamic. You see a lot of people on different places. So it's a fun industry. But yeah, let's make sure that we move in that direction to make sure that at a certain point shippers can also be satisfied about the service that carriers offer. Another thing is the central freight pricing, but also within the carriers have clear accountability, but also the local incentive for customer service. Not that we see on the other side of the ocean that the agent is not very interested to solve an issue for a global account because there is no incentive for that. That's it from my side. Thanks for your attention.